Welcome to session number, which session is it? Number 28 of Genesis in Depth. I'm Dr. John McMath. I'm joined here by my friends in Italy and in the Philippines, and the occasional stray American just wandering past. Uh, we also want to say hi to those joining us on YouTube and Facebook. If you'd like to see the rest of this series and other series like them, YouTube and Facebook have a permanent record of these videos. Okay, let's begin. We're in chapter 32 of the book of Genesis. And let me make sure that my recording is happening. Yes. 32 in Genesis is known in the literature as the wrestling match. And the whole chapter isn't about the wrestling match, but that's the high point. And it's one of the most enigmatic passages in the Bible. A very strange thing, where Jacob is met by a man who turns out to be God in some sense. Some use the phrase "the angel of the Lord." We'll look at that when we get there. But a very strange passage all the way around. Let's go ahead and share the main screen here. Chapter 32 is the preparation to meet. Let's see what I've got here. Yes. All right, that's over there, and that should be okay. That doesn't look bad. Okay, the preparation to meet Esau. Jacob's brother Esau, of course, has been out and about. He's married several women and has raised up a brood of kids of his own, probably grandkids by this time. He's been married for over 20 years by the time Jacob and Esau meet. So there's quite a gulf of time that has gone by here. The uh, the boys of Jacob, the 11 sons of Jacob, are getting older. They're no longer little boys. They're grown men, uh, all except for Joseph. Joseph will be younger, but we'll see Joseph as a teenager, not too far along further in the book of Genesis. But the other 10 are grown men. We're going to see their adventures in the promised land as they begin showing off some of their prowess. Uh, Jacob is going to knows that he's going to be meeting with Esau. He knows that Esau will meet him somewhere along the way. Jacob assumes that Esau will do what Jacob would have done. That is, bring a bunch of armed men and prepare for battle. This is exactly what Jacob would have done, because Jacob is the grasper. He always wants what he wants when he wants it, and there can be no argument with Jacob. He's a con man, and he'll always get his way. He goes out of his way to get for himself exactly what he feels he deserves. Uh, and that, of course, is the point of this whole chapter. We can think of this chapter as kind of a critique of Jacob's approach to life. He has spent his whole life trying by force, by trickery, by deceitfulness, by genetic manipulation, even if he didn't know what he was doing, to receive the blessing that God has promised by grace. God said, "You're going to be a great nation. You don't need just live your life. You're going to be prosperous. I will bless you. You don't need to fight for this. You don't need to cheat for this. I will I will bless you. Uh, and all along the way, Jacob has lied, cheated, stolen, anything he needed to do in order to get his way. Um, and we come to a climax here. What we're going to see is that Jacob doesn't really learn the lesson of this chapter. It doesn't seem to mean to him what it ought to mean. At any rate, here we go. Chapter 32 at verse 1. And Jacob went on his way. We see the end of chapter 31. Uh, Laban arose, kissed his grandchildren, his daughters, and departed and left for Padan Aram with the Mizpah blessing. This rock is a sign between you and me. Don't you come to my side, I won't go to your side. We're a couple of guys who don't trust each other. Let God watch between us. And that's often called the Mizpah blessing. We probably shouldn't use it as a blessing. It's intended to be a curse. And oh, I think in the future maybe I should just call it the Mizpah curse, but this is what it is. And so Jacob went on his way, 32, verse 1, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." So he called the place, or the name of that place, Machnaim, which means the camps, two camps. Uh, okay, this is a strange couple of verses. Uh, 32, 1 and 2. The angels of God met him there. Now, that the term angels is very clear here. There's no mystery about what the passage means. Machnai Elohi, the angels of God. Is a very clear Hebrew, and there's no textual problem there. So what we're to assume by this is that some spiritual messengers from God, no doubt in some apparently human form, met Jacob there. Perhaps they had a conversation. The passage doesn't tell us. Perhaps there was a message from God. The passage doesn't tell us. Perhaps they all shook hands and agreed to be friends. The passage doesn't tell us. Maybe they set up camp and had a meal together. But the passage doesn't tell us. When I get to heaven, one of the questions that I'm going to ask, if I can find Jacob, I will ask him, what did those angels say to you? What was that about? There is literally nothing in the context that gives us any help with this. So the chapter starts off as an enigmatic, difficult thing. The commentaries are, for once, virtually unanimous that we don't have the foggiest idea what is going on here. Some angels met Jacob. Now, what we can say is that the presence of angels here in this place, and we have a pretty good idea of the location of the place. It's in the upper reaches of the Jabbok Valley, near the headwaters of the Jabbok, and the place was known in Old Testament times as Machnaim. David went to Machnaim, so we know the place, and there are a number of interactions between David's people and the people of Machnaim. And we see that the angels met Jacob there. Now, among other things, this means that God is sending at the bare minimum a message that God is still around. He is still in the business of sending angels. He can meet you wherever you happen to be. We see all of that. But besides that barefaced, um, obvious truth, uh, we don't know what went on here. Perhaps the angels talked about the coming meeting with Esau. If so, it didn't settle Jacob's fears. He continued to be afraid. So Jacob sent messengers before him. By this time, Jacob has quite a considerable entourage, a group of people who are a part of his household. These will be servants of various sorts who have been hired to take care of sheep and goats and camels and driving the various animals, donkeys and whatnot as everything is moving along. We've got a whole bunch of folks who are along for the ride here on Jacob's trip to meet his brother. So Jacob sent messengers. And again, it's an interesting word because the term messenger is the same as the word angels. Okay, now we know these are just people, but it's good for us to remember that an angel is primarily a messenger. He brings a message from God. So Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir in the country of Edom, okay, instructing them, thus shall you say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I've sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants and female servants. I have sent to tell my lord in order that I may find favor in your sight. Okay. The basic message is, Dear Esau, how are you? I'm rich. I have got all kinds of stuff. The last 20 years, I haven't been twiddling my thumbs. I've gotten rich. And I have wives and children and donkeys and flocks and servants and all kinds of stuff. So I thought I would let you know that I'm coming. And perhaps I will find favor in your sight. Jacob is wondering what he will have to pay in order to find favor in Esau's sight, uh, because of course this is what Jacob would have done. Um, so I have all of this, and the messengers, verse 6, returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you." Oh, and by the way, there are 400 men with him. Now, 400 is just a bit short of a British regiment. It's a sizable military force. Simply the fact that these are men and not women and children and flocks and herds means that this is a military operation. Uh, Men in biblical times were routinely armed with something, a sling, perhaps a small bronze knife, perhaps a club of some sort. A mace could be made by tying a sizable flint stone on the end of a stick. Uh, these are not they're not armed with submachine guns. They're armed with sticks and maybe bows and arrows, but more likely slings. So rocks and sticks will be the order of the day, and those are dangerous enough. So he's coming with 400 men, and Jacob is doing the calculations quickly in his head, the number of men he has and the number of men Esau has, and he knows that he's got a problem. So Jacob, verse 7, was greatly afraid and distressed. Slightly different words. The the afraid uh, speaks to his emotional state. He was really scared, and deep down in his soul, He was thinking, "This is it. I'm going to die." Uh, that's that's that skipping the heartbeat kind of fear, just a pit, you know, base of the stomach, empty pit. So Jacob was greatly afraid, and he was distressed. And this word means he didn't know which way to turn. Speaks to his strategic sense of the moment. Jacob always seems to come up on his feet, and we would expect that Jacob would figure out what to do. Uh, shall we try to outflank my brother? Shall we meet him head on? Should I go into a full retreat mode, go back to Padan Aram? What should I do? But Jacob doesn't know. He was greatly afraid and distressed and couldn't figure out what to do. So he divided the people who were with him, the flocks and the herds and the camels, into two camps, thinking if Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape. Okay, that's a counsel of desperation. If Jacob had thought that he had enough of a body of men to make a defense, he would have gathered them into a defensive position, piled up sticks or rocks, and gotten ready for a battle. But Jacob wasn't thinking that way. He heard of 400 armed men, and he's immediately concerned. If Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, and of course defeats it, then the other camp will be able to escape. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, the God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. Oh, yeah, he's beginning to pray. This is verses 9 and then into 10. I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. We're going to stop here for just a second. I'll introduce you to some vocabulary. This is the first time we see these two words together in the Old Testament. Steadfast love is the Hebrew word chesed. Chesed, H-E-S-E-D. And it means a loyal love or a steadfast love. It's often used of a mother's love in the Old Testament, the kind of love that always believes the best and will always stick with a project, with a person, to the end. Doesn't matter what. It is the word that is most frequently used of God's love for his people, a love that not only doesn't let go, but which fulfills all promises. Chesed is often uh, paralleled with the word faithfulness. And this is emunah, or usually the way we find it in context, emet. So chesed and emet go together. They always go together. Steadfast love and faithfulness. Now, steadfast love is a kind of faithful love, and faithfulness implies love as well. So the two of them are overlapping, and yet when we put this together, there is a tremendous emphasis on not only the love, which is a genuine and passionate love, a kind of love that is deep and wide, but also a permanence a perseverance. One of the reasons that in the New Testament we argue for the permanence of salvation is built on this Old Testament concept of the chesed and emet of God. When God makes a promise, he keeps his promises. And Jacob is a good example of this. Jacob is not worthy of the grace of God. He could not have earned the grace of God. And yet God chose to be gracious to Jacob. God chose to include Jacob in the messianic line. Jacob continued throughout his life to resist the grace of God and attempt to earn the blessing on his own effort. And God's message is continuous. Uh, I This love and faithfulness is a continuous hallmark of Jacob's life, in spite of the fact that even though he says it here, he doesn't live it. Okay, with only my staff I crossed the Jordan, and now I've become two camps. And by the way, the repetition of this term, two camps, is exactly what Machnayim means. So the angels met him, and Esau said, surely this is the camp of God. And he decided to camp there, and he divided it into two camps. He called the place Machnayim, the two camps. Is he referring to angel camps or his own camps? And I think he's referring to his own camps. But it becomes the name of the place, and that will continue. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So Jacob is wondering, what can I do? What new strategy, what new deceptiveness can I arrange in order to hang on to this blessing that God has promised? And the answer will come just a little later here as we go. And so he stayed there that night. And from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, 10 male donkeys. And these he handed over to his servants. By the way, that's a king's ransom. That's a very valuable gift in the ancient world. And he handed these over to his servants. Every drove by itself and said to his servants, pass on ahead of me, put a space between drove and drove. And he instructed the first, when Esau, my brother, meets you and asks you, to whom do you belong? Where are you going? Whose are these ahead of you? Then you shall say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present sent to my lord Esau. And moreover, he is behind us. He likewise instructed the second and the third, and all who followed the droves. You shall say the same thing to Esau when you find him, and you shall say, moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. Jacob knows that he has cheated his brother. He really believed that his success in life was a result of his cheating. And he's wrong. His success in life is a result of God's blessing. He's still trying. He's still trying. He thought, perhaps I will appease him. He will accept me. So the present passed on ahead of him. He himself stayed that night in the camp. And that same night he arose, verse 22. and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. And he took them. That ford of the Jabbok is at the Jordan River. So that's the spot. Uh, and he took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. Okay, there's this key phrase, is the marker of the beginning of this wrestling match. Jacob is the one on the right in this mosaic, and the angel is the one on the left. Uh, this is found in the Arian baptistry in Ravenna in Italy. For those who like to go track things down, this is the wrestling match in Ravenna. Very, very interesting event here, because we've got Jacob alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. So this is that, during the night, everybody else is going across the Jordan, and we have Jacob here in this Machnaim area, wrestling with somebody. And when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Now that when I was much younger, I did just a little bit of wrestling until I discovered that wrestling was really not my thing. I wasn't quick enough, and I didn't have the muscle strength, so I never got beyond the very first tryouts. The coach there was looking for guys who had this would have been about ninth grade or so. I was just a little guy. And had I been wiry and tough, I might have made it. And that's what the coach was hoping for, but I wasn't. But I know a little bit about wrestling, just a teeny bit. And I know that when wrestlers go at each other, it is entirely possible to put an arm or a knee or a hip out of joint. It's possible to do that. When that happens, it is an extraordinarily painful injury. This is a very big deal injury. This is no small thing. And a person with a dislocated hip is done for the day. You don't get up from there and continue your wrestling match. With a dislocated hip, you're badly in need of morphine and a stretcher. You're in bad shape. So here it is, and we see the struggle. Who was Jacob wrestling with? Well, it says this was a man, but the man saw he could not prevail. And so Jacob's hip was put out of joint. And then he said, the man, "Let me go, for the day has broken." And the commentators go everywhere with this. It means the night is past, the sun is up, and there's some kind of ancient taboos about angels walking around in daylight. I'm not going to try to follow all of that up, but it's interesting that there's this allusion to that. But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Ah, there it is. Jacob seems to be realizing that he has met not only his match, but his superior. He is realizing that he's in the presence of a superior being, if not the supreme being. And he said to him, The man said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Okay. Uh, who who is Jacob wrestling with here in this setting? Is it a dream or the real thing? Well, he goes limping away afterwards. It was real enough. Uh, he is he is wrestling with God to demand a blessing. So Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" So he won't give the name. And there he blessed him. So Jacob wrestled with this messenger of God, perhaps the angel of the Lord. I'm not going to call this character the pre-incarnate Christ. That's an ancient tradition, but I think it doesn't work very well. This is an angel emissary from God Himself, with apparently all of the powers that God has delegated to him, including the power to bless Jacob. Uh, and so this angel blessed Jacob. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen the face, or I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." Uh, Jacob says to himself, "I've seen God face to face." The name Peniel means the face of God. So I've seen the face of God. Jacob believed that he was wrestling with God. He was wrestling with God in order to obtain the blessing that God had promised anyway. Jacob was working and struggling to the point of dislocating a hip in order to demand from God the blessing that he would have received anyway. Uh, I think the great failure, the great lesson from Jacob's life and from this wrestling match is that Jacob lacked the faith to simply rest in the completed work of God. All the way back to Genesis, when God finished and He rested on the seventh day, and then later on told His people, uh, work for 6 days, gathering the manna. The seventh day you should rest. That was not a religious obligation to earn the blessing. It was a recognition that we as believers need to learn to rest in the blessing that God has given us. The blessing that God has given us is sufficient. It is all that we need. God's grace is always enough. So Jacob named the place Peniel, saying, "I've seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." He thought he was going to die. Well, the sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, which is another word altogether, limping because of his hip. So off he goes. He had encountered his match and was finally crippled by a supernatural blow. He had encountered the power of God Himself. Uh, and the name here, a change from Jacob to Israel, is interesting. Uh, what kind of name is this? Uh, Israel means he struggles or fights with God. Okay, Jacob's name, of course, had always meant the grasper. But God here changes his name from Jacob to Israel. The word Israel can mean he fights with God, or it can mean God fights. And this kind of a double entendre, uh, the Hebrew intends for us to pick up on both senses here. Jacob is the one who fights with God in order to obtain a blessing. He goes out of his way to be the tough hombre who will fight to get the blessing he wants. Uh, and yet God intended to fight for Israel all along and to be the blessing. This is ultimately the meaning of the name. God fights. I don't have to. God fights the war and has won the victory. It's not up to me, it's up to God. Uh, Jacob finally got loose from this and he limps off into the sunrise, following everybody else. In order to enjoy the blessing of God, we say that Jacob's nature had to be changed. So from Jacob to Israel, God fights. God had spent his life fighting to wrest God's blessing out of all the wrong places, uh, on all these wives and children, all picked up by somebody's deception, Laban's deception, Jacob's deception, all of the stuff that Jacob had done to become a wealthy man, and now he's going to lose it all. And God insists on giving him a blessing that he couldn't win with his own effort. I will bless you. I will make your name great. This land will be your land. And God will fight for Israel. That phrase, God will fight for Israel, is one that the Jewish people have clung to throughout their existence. And today in Israel, right now, with the multiple wars in Gaza, with the Houthis, with Hezbollah in Lebanon, with the Iranians, this is a terrible position that Israel is in. And yet we have seen all the way through this that in spite of the tragedy of all the dead, God fights for Israel, and Israel will prevail. In the end of time, Israel continues to be a player because God fights for Israel. Okay. Uh, yeah. And off he goes. So to this day, limping on his dislocated, I couldn't limp on a dislocated hip. I would need an ambulance. So Jacob is a remarkable man. No other way to say it. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket. Okay, and that would have been written at the time that Moses wrote the book of Genesis, or perhaps a little later, by an editor who added that note. But it became a tradition that the people of Israel don't eat the sinew of the thigh on the hip socket because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh and broke his sinew. What a terrible injury. So Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked. We're going to go just a bit into chapter 33. And behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So Jacob is now uh, realizing that he's meeting the end of the road. And so he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two female servants, and he put the servants with their children in front, and then Leah and her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all, and he himself went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Oh my. So all of this preparation, all of this struggle, all of this distress and fear is for nothing. If one of the messengers had gone directly to Esau and said, uh, that you're about to meet with Jacob, what's your intention? Esau probably would have said, well, of course, I'm his brother. I'm glad he's here. So for Esau, this is a unimportant meeting. It's definitely not earth-shattering. It's definitely not the beginning of a war. Why did he have 400 men with him? Maybe that's the way Esau traveled. We don't really know. But Esau, who is by now also a prosperous man with wives and children and donkeys and camels of his own, really doesn't need what Jacob has to give him. And Jacob realizes, perhaps, that all his riches are just the normal blessing that God gives to anyone who works hard in life. So there's no great thing here. And so Esau lifted up his eyes and saw the women and children and said, who are these? Jacob said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. And then the servants drew near, they and their children, and bowed down, and Leah likewise and her children drew near and bowed down. And last Joseph and Rachel drew near, and they bowed down, and Esau said, what do you mean by all this company that I meet? And Jacob said, to find favor in the sight of the Lord. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. Jacob said, no, please, if I found favor in your eyes, accept my present from my hand, for I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me. Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, because I have enough. And thus he urged him, and he took it. Okay? And Esau said, well, let's journey on our way. I will go ahead of you. But Jacob said to him, oh, my Lord knows that the children are frail, that the nursing flocks and herds are a care to me. If they are driven too hard for one day, all the flocks will die. Let my Lord pass on ahead of his servant, and I will lead on slowly, at the pace of the livestock that are ahead of me, and at the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord in Seir. And so Esau said, let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. And he said, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. But Jacob journeyed to Sukkot and built himself a house and made booths or tents for his livestock. Therefore, the name of the place is called Sukkot. Sukkot means the tents. And verse 18, let's see here. And Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan. Shechem is about 25 kilometers north of Jerusalem on the Patriarchal Highway. The city itself was a very small thing. Today it's called Tel Balata, and it sits in between the two mountains of Ebal and Gerizim. Ebal is the bald mountain, and Gerizim has trees all over the top. Much later on, Joshua is going to make an altar at Shechem. Shechem will become one of the first cities to voluntarily join the Israelite Confederation. So a fairly important city. But at any rate, Jacob came safely to the town, the village of Shechem, in the land of Canaan. On his way from Paddan Aram, he camped before the city. And from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he bought for 100 pieces of money the piece of land on which he had pitched his tent. And there he erected an altar and called it El Elohe Israel, God, the God of Israel. Um, so we have Jacob safely back in the land of Canaan, back in the land of promise. He's camped outside of the city of Shechem somewhere. We have never found Jacob's altar, uh, in spite of the fact that we've looked for it. It's probably long gone. Uh, we do think that we found Joshua's altar on Mount Ebal, but we'll come to that another time. So there they are, all the way to Shechem, and the story's going to continue from here. This story gets interesting as Jacob's sons and the people of Shechem interact. But that'll be next week. We'll begin uh, at chapter 34 next Wednesday. Let me make that quit and let us. Yeah, now we're going to unmute and I'm going to say bye bye. We'll see you all next week. Love everybody. Oscar, how are you doing?
Bye-bye.
I'm
Fine.
glad you have internet again. I know that
Yeah,
was yeah. I
yeah.
we may need to do something about that. We'll talk next time I'm there. We need to figure out a consistent internet connection. Anyway, good to see everybody. God bless. We'll see you next week, God willing. Bye bye now.
Thank you. Thank you so
Ciao
Thank
much.
you, Dr.
ciao.
Dan.
Ciao.
Ciao
My
tutti.
pleasure.
Ciao,
Bye bye,
ciao.
Roger. BJ, see
Ciao a
y'all.
tutti.
Bye.